Hey everybody, this is the digital asset investor, and I wanted to tell you, tell you a little story today. I've got it on the Federal Reserve System Wikipedia because I wanted to kind of explain to you a little bit about um, the way the Federal Reserve System is presented versus the way it was formed, and how that all ties into cryptocurrency and ultimately Ripple and XRP. The If you go to their Wikipedia page, it basically presents it like Federal Reserve System is a central banking system of the United States, and it tells you it was created in 1913 with the enactment of the Federal Reserve Act. what they don't what they don't go into what is the how we got to this Federal Reserve Act. They don't tell you the exact some of what I would consider nefarious activity that led up to this. And there's a guy that wrote a book about it, and I wanted to tell you just briefly a summary of what he covers in that book. It's called, and there's a video where he actually gave a lecture. His name is G. Edward Griffin, The Creature from Jekyll Island, a second look at the Federal Reserve System. And in this book, and I took a few notes so that I could go over it with you. But in the book, he basically tells you who was involved to put all of this in motion to get to the Federal Reserve Act. And so I'll provide a link to this video, but I'm going to summarize it for you real quick. But the first point I wanted to make is that the Federal Reserve is centralized control of the monetary system. When you hear people talk about cryptocurrencies, whether it's Bitcoin or XRP or any of these things, it's almost like they're proudly saying that they are decentralized, and part of that comes out of the fact that Bitcoin, the whole creation of Bitcoin, was against the current monetary system, and I'll go into that a little bit. But I want you to know the story of the monster. What do you call it? The creature. I'm sorry, not monster. The creature from Jekyll Island, because I see Ripple as the wonderful creature from Silicon Valley, and I'm going to kind of tie all this together. First thing you need to know is Jekyll Island is an island off of the coast of Georgia, and it's to this day mainly it's wealthy people that go down there and have cottages and mansions and everything you can imagine. But in November of 1910, the beginnings of the Federal Reserve were actually created on Jekyll Island. And in this guy's book, he tells the story, and the way he tells it is there were I think it was about 7 men who were all told to go separately and to meet at the railroad car of this Senator Nelson Aldrich, who was the chairman of the National Monetary Commission at the time. And all 7 of these men were gonna meet at his railroad car in New Jersey separately, and it was a very secretive thing because all of these were high profile bankers and financiers and people in the government, and they all came separately at one at a time. They used first names only, and some of them even had code names. They all got in the train. Once they were on the train, they even went so far as to still use first names and code names so that the waiters would not recognize any of them and be able to tell the story of seeing all of these major players on one train going to Brunswick, Georgia. Um, I noted here that these men would be the men who would sit in a room. I believe it was for 9 days, and they would create the Federal Reserve, what became the Federal Reserve. So it's important to know who these men were. Senator Nelson Aldrich, I said he was the guy. He owned the railroad car, and he was the chairman of this National Monetary Commission. He was a business associate of J.P. Morgan, father-in-law. He was the father-in-law to John D. Rockefeller Jr. Another guy that was there was Abraham Piat Andrew, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. Also, Frank Vanderlip, President of the National City Bank of New York. That was the largest bank at the time. And he represented the financial interests of William Rockefeller and Kuhn, Loeb and Company Investment Bank, which was a huge investment bank at the time. Also, Henry Davison, senior partner of J.P. Morgan. Charles Norton, president of the National Bank of New York, another giant bank at the time. Benjamin Strong, the head of J.P. Morgan's Bankers Trust Company, said, and then one note is that 3 years later, this guy would become the first head of the newly formed Federal Reserve. Paul Warburg was a partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company, the investment bank, and he was one of the wealthiest men in the world. This guy is the guy that they based Daddy Warbucks off of in Little Orphan Annie. I'm sure you've seen the movie. So these 7 men, they represented 1/4 of the wealth of the entire world at the time. And what was so strange about the whole thing and what was so bad is that ultimately what they were doing is they were colluding. These were bank competitors that were colluding together to create a banking system that was basically a cartel of people that were agreeing not to compete with each other. And that was the whole point of it. And this was set up secretly for that reason. And so I wanted to go through that with you. To most people, this is one of those things about our country and probably a lot of countries. We all know that the powerful run the country, but that's one thing when it's not hurting the people. But in our case, that's not the truth. When I'm fixing to show you how money is created in the way they designed this system, and that ultimately hatched Bitcoin, which hatched all cryptocurrency. And I want to go over why that happened and how Ripple comes out of that smelling like a rose and really ultimately could save many of us from horrible situations. This is how money is created in the Federal Reserve, and it doesn't take a genius to look at this chart. Just the part about the U.S. Congress alone is really creepy when you think about it. They want money for a government program, and then they tell the U.S. Treasury, and then basically Treasury bonds are sold, and then that's how they fund government programs. But that was in all of these people meeting, because you have to ask the ultimate question: how did all these powerful men in this equation, what did they give the government in return? Because the government has to have theirs too. And so ultimately what it was is the U.S. Congress needs to be able to get money whenever they want it. And in return, these bankers, everything starts here, but everything that really happens is happening right here. And all that is good old-fashioned money printing. And in the case of the Congress, the money's making its way back to the Congress so that they can do government programs and keep getting themselves reelected. But the money goes to these commercial banks to keep the rich getting richer by loaning out money at above what they got the money at, which was free, printed, print button, print button, print button. And this right here is a winning situation for these guys and for these guys. But guess who ultimately loses? Who is it that's being loaned this money that these guys got for free? Individuals and businesses. And the printing of this money eventually kills all the average people because they devalue the money, make it worthless. Along comes Bitcoin, and I'll say it right now, the Federal Reserve in the traditional sense died on August 18th of 2008. On that day, Bitcoin.org was registered. And No, it wasn't registered on that day. It was in November. It was registered. But, well, let's see. On August 18th, 2008, the domain name Bitcoin was registered. Okay. And in November of that year, a link to a paper authored by Satoshi Nakamoto titled Bitcoin Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System was posted to a cryptocurrency mailing list. But this, whether they know it or not right now, and I think they do know it, this was the death of our government printing money, which is not good for our country. It's not just the U.S. government. This was the death of the governments of the world printing money, because now the people have an option besides accepting that printed money. The values of cryptocurrencies and the way they've shot up over the last few years is it's directly because of this. And anybody that tells you anything else is not paying attention. But let me tell you why. The reason that power is gone, there's no better example than the Ledger Nano S. Someone can put $1 million in digital currency on this Ledger Nano S, stick it in their pocket, and they're gone. It's gone. And the fact that can happen is so powerful I can't put it into words. Now, let's talk about Ripple, because I'm not telling this story I'm not telling it as an anti-government story. That's not why I'm telling you this. When governments do the wrong thing, this is the wrong thing. The people figured out a solution to the wrong thing. You're still going to have government. We want to have government, but we want to have responsible government. And so enter Ripple. Okay. Now, one of the things that is said by many about Ripple, and the reason that they don't like Ripple, is because Ripple, they call it centralized, even though it's actually decentralized. It's open source. Anybody can build on it. But the reason that many are against Ripple is because when Ripple was created, Bitcoin was just put out there, and it was put out to the world. There is no central person that was involved with it in any kind of way. Ripple took a different approach. Ripple decided to focus on the banking market, and I can't read their minds, but I believe that what they did is two things which were genius. The first thing is that they saw Bitcoin and they said, we can make it better. And then the second thing is they said, yeah, okay, there's some bad things about the government. They know that, just like the guy that created Bitcoin knows that. But that does not mean that our world is going to go along without a government. There are always going to be powers that be. These digital currencies have checked the powers that be, but that does not mean that you're going to be able to build something without the help of the powers that be. And I think that it's a good thing. But so Ripple put out XRP. I think they did it around 2012. But what they did, they put out a better version. Bitcoin is not even in XRP's league. XRP's speed, transactions 3 to 4 seconds. The cost is, look at Bitcoin, 28.23 per transaction versus that. Come on. Scalability, how many transactions per second? There is no competition. There is no competition for XRP, period. Not only is there not competition in terms of the digital asset itself, there's no competition in terms of first mover advantages dealing with businesses. There is no other digital currency or digital asset which has been working for 5 years, making deals with banks and getting customers. This is it. But they have spent that 5 or 6 years working with not just the U.S. government, but the governments of the world. Because I don't care what there are certain people that, mostly young people probably, that believe that Bitcoin is somehow the way to go because it's going to save us all from the government. But newsflash, I'm 44 years old now, and you're not getting governments out of the equation, and you really don't want to. You need to have a central government for, for safety's sake, for national security, if for no other reason. But so anyway, this is how Ripple was formed, and they created the best product, and they've been working with that product and working hand in hand with governments of the world to make that the best product. And so now we are here, and I wanted to show you the last few things that are game changers for XRP. To this point, to this day, XRP, all of the appreciation of XRP, the digital asset, have been based on pure speculation. XRapid is going live imminently. Hundreds of exchanges are going live imminently. Wall Street is coming in imminently. Institutional money from Wall Street is coming in imminently. All of this is coming very soon. But there are a few things that Ripple is doing while all of that is going on that is worth hearing about. The first one is Codius, and I really Codius is a smart contract platform that they've created, which in my mind, when I read through all this, if you really want to sift down through it, what Codius is it allows other companies to create, they can do ICOs on XRPs on the Ripple network. They can do ICOs, thus driving up the price of XRP. When I see Codius, that's what I see. So if you can imagine, that's how Ethereum went up so much, is that there were other digital currencies that were building into their platform, thus driving the price up. This just was announced a week or so ago, and so this is going to be huge, huge, huge. Next is what they announced this past week in consensus, X-Spring. Okay, now this to me is the most genius thing ever. X-Spring it would be like if a company creates a venture capital company underneath it, but since you have a digital asset, you can say, yeah, we're gonna give you money to start this. We like your idea for a new business, and all that's required for us to give you this money is that we believe in the business you're trying to create, and B, that your business is going to run off of XRP. So you know what happens then. So that's a genius idea. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was what the CTO of Ripple, Stefan Thomas, and this, you'll probably start to see this more and more, and that is he has just left to create the first startup which is an X-Spring startup. And so how smart is this? You're taking a guy who knows everything about the inside of Ripple, and now you're going to fund his startup to start Coil, which is going to be a startup that it's basically going to use micro payment services, like for, let's say, a blog online. The way I read this, let's say you're reading a blog online and you don't want to subscribe and pay you don't want to pay $30 a month to read this blog, but you liked an article and you wanted to be able to view that whole article, and so you might be able to pay 0.12 Ripple right there on the spot and just read that one article. So that's kind of my understanding of the way this might work. I'm sure it's more sophisticated than that, but that's like the surface of it. I mean, we're entering a whole new world. Okay, I know that was kind of long, but I think that I kind of painted the picture I was trying to paint, I hope. This is the digital asset investor, and I'm not an investment advisor. This is just for entertainment. Please hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you.